Coming up, Bill Richardson's presidential campaign added Indigenous voices to a national conversation. We explore how. And Congress is returning to Washington, but will there be a budget? Plus, the Crow Creek tribe is rethinking law enforcement in a big way. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We begin today in Arizona, where federal officials are fresh off a celebration with Indigenous leaders regarding water rights. In January, Congress approved the Hualapai Tribe Water Rights Settlement Act of 2022. That came after more than 10 years of negotiations between the tribal nation, the federal government, and the state of Arizona. The settlement allocates just over 1 billion gallons of water per year to the tribe. It also establishes a trust fund of over $300 million to develop water infrastructure on Hualapai tribal lands. Last week, Interior Department Deputy Secretary Tommy Beaudreau and Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs Brian Newland joined members of the community to honor this work. Beaudreau called the settlement a true collaboration that is important as the climate crisis worsens and the West gets drier. Well, an abortion support group is out with new data on how many Indigenous people are utilizing its services. Women's health has been complicated in many tribal communities since 1976. That's because of an amendment from Congress that prohibits the Indian Health Service from providing abortion services. And it's not just abortion. Indigenous women have a more difficult time with other reproductive health services like contraception. Indigenous Women Rising has seen a dramatic increase in demand for contraceptive services following the reversal of Roe v. Wade a year ago. The group funded 37 abortions in 2019, 600 in 2022, and over 300 in the first 6 months of this year. One challenge, they say, is distance. Women have to travel out of state sometimes in order to get an abortion and many contraception services. Just this year, from January to June, Indigenous Women Rising spent more money on transportation and other needs than they spent in 2022. States with some of the largest Native populations, like North Dakota, South Dakota, and Oklahoma, already lack basic contraceptive access. We head now to the Caribbean, where the island nation of Dominica could soon have its first Indigenous president. Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt nominated Sylvanie Burton to the office of president. She is a member of the Kalinago tribe and would be the first Indigenous head of state. She would also be the first woman to hold that office. Dominica's parliament meets on September 12th to elect a replacement for the current president, whose 10-year term expires in October. Burton would be the 11th head of state since the island gained independence from Great Britain in 1978. Burton is not new to the role. At 58 years old, she has been a public servant since 2014 and most recently served as foreign secretary. The Kalinago tribe has Indigenous territory on Dominica. In Budapest, a Native American athlete is taking home a silver medal in the World Athletics Championships. Janae Casanavoid won second place in the hammer throw competition with a mark of 76.36 meters, which is about 250 feet. She is the first Native American woman to win a medal at a national championship, winning bronze in Oregon last year. Cassandra Voigt is from the Comanche Nation of Oklahoma. She is currently a professional Nike track and field athlete representing Team USA. She is also a Nike N7 ambassador. Earlier this year, Cassandra Voigt was inducted into the North American Indigenous Athletics Hall of Fame for her accomplishments. Her farthest throw is a whopping 78 meters, which is the third best in the USA of all time and the sixth best in the world. She is currently ranked second in the U.S. and third in the entire world. We said our congratulations to Janae on a fantastic job. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. The former governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson, was no stranger to Native American communities. ICT's Mark Trahant has this reporting on Richardson's storied career and how tribal leaders are remembering him.
Bill Richardson's resume often intersected with Indigenous issues. He first ran for Congress from northern New Mexico and lost to a Republican and future Interior Secretary, Manuel Lujan. Then, 2 years later, Richardson won the seat, holding some 2,000 community meetings, representing a district that included portions of the Navajo Nation, Hickory Apache, as well as most of the Pueblos. He served in Congress for 14 years, including a term as chairman of the Native American Affairs Subcommittee. Legislation he sponsored included the American Indian Religious Freedom Act amendments of 1994, the Indian Dam Safety Act, the Tribal Self-Governance Act, and the Hickory Apache Tribe's Water Rights Settlement Act. Navajo Nation President Boo Nygren had this to say about Richardson's legacy.
He actually went out to the local communities, the local chapter houses. He understood the issues at the local level, and he used that, and he never forgotten the people that got him there. So that's one of the things I think about when it comes to a leader as high as a secretary, as high as a governor of the great state of New Mexico, that he truly understood the challenges that the Navajo people face.
There is another story to tell about Richardson. I have covered politics since the 1970s, and a few presidential campaigns have changed how Indigenous people participate. There was Barry Commoner and LaDonna Harris in 1980 running a campaign on a cleaner environment, and this was before global warming was even a phrase. And Harris, a Comanche, represented the first time a Native woman campaigned for that office. Then there was Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition in 1984. He was the first candidate to actually campaign in tribal nations, including an amazing speech before the Navajo Nation Council. Then there was Bill Richardson.
And I'm running for president because this nation needs a leader with a proven track record.
The official story goes something like this. Richardson's campaign was short-lived after a poor showing in early primary and caucus states. That narrative misses his impact. He set a new standard for Indigenous involvement in a presidential campaign. He hired Laura Harris, a Comanche citizen, as his Midwestern states political director. She wasn't just a voice on tribal affairs. She was a key campaign official and strategist. In August 1980, there was Prez on the Res, a forum for candidates on the Morongo Nation in California. The favorite candidates, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, passed on the event. But Richardson said, "When I was asked to participate, it took me 20 seconds to accept. Native Americans must be taken seriously. Native Americans are part of this nation's fabric." He campaigned on a major restructuring of the Indian Health Service because its level of care was a failure of the federal government and a breach of the United States commitment to Native Americans. If elected, Richardson promised to create a Secretary of Native American Indian Affairs, a cabinet-level post. You need to raise these issues to the highest levels to send a signal that other government agencies need to take Native American issues seriously, he said. Many candidates will have a position paper on Native American issues. I've done it. If you want to know what he'd do as president, he said, look to what he's done in New Mexico while governor.
And my candidacy is based on my experience, my background, my record. I believe it's a good record.
Richardson was 75 years old when he died last week. In Phoenix, Arizona, Mark Trahant, ICT News.
One of the promises made by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy was a commitment to regular order. That's the idea that bills, especially ones involving spending, would work their way through committees and get a full hearing in the House. He said the Republicans would avoid massive omnibus bills that wrapped multiple legislative priorities into a single must-pass bill. That did not happen. The Senate passed 12 appropriations bills, but the House has yet to act to fund the government before the deadline of September 30th. Here to talk more about that is ICT regular contributor Holly Cook Macaro. She is the founding principal and president of The Angle, and she is also a board member of Indig Public Media, the parent company that owns ICT and the ICT Newscast. Welcome back, Holly.
Thank you, Leah. It's good to see you.
So tell us what's next with this funding bill.
Well, that remains to be seen. The Senate is back this week, and then the House will come back next on September 12th. And the current spending bills, authorized spending bills, they expire on September 30th. So that leaves just under 3 weeks for the House to come to any spending agreements. As you said, the Senate has passed all 12 of their spending bills. The House has passed one. And while Speaker McCarthy certainly made that commitment, and it's always a lot easier to make those commitments and criticisms when you're in the minority, right? Like, this is what we're going to do. But as we've all seen over the past several months, this is a very fractious Republican caucus. And right now, Speaker McCarthy is really, I think, trying to find a path forward to avoid a government shutdown that never benefits the party in power and in control of the House. But he has to figure out how to deal with the House Freedom Caucus's concerns that they will not vote for a spending bill that does not crack down on undocumented immigration and the restart of the building of the border wall. Marjorie Taylor Greene has also said she will not vote for the bill without certain provisions that she wants in the bill. And with the very, very slim majority that Speaker McCarthy has in his caucus, he really does have to find a way to address these. Now, those points in particular are going to have a really hard time passing the Democratic Senate. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks to see how this chess game plays out.
When Congress can't agree on a budget, the usual next step is a temporary spending bill. It's typically called a continuing resolution. Do you think that that's possible this time around?
I do. The President Biden, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and Speaker McCarthy have all indicated they're in support of a continuing resolution. That's really kind of a stopgap measure that would buys you a little time before another potential government shutdown, should there not be agreement. But I think even those in the far right of Speaker McCarthy's caucus, though, in the Republican Party, they are even hesitant to pass a continuing resolution. So it is this week he's in Japan. He will be returning to it's going to be hand-to-hand combat within his own caucus and trying to find a path forward. And this is a year that we're going into a presidential election, a very critical election year for the House and the Senate. And to have the government shut down at this point is going to be a problem for him. So I know it really, like I said, going to be hand-to-hand combat for him to find his way forward.
Speaking about the election, we actually saw over the Labor Day weekend that the president was campaigning on this issue. How far apart are the House Republicans and the White House in these negotiations?
I would say it's not a matter of numbers. It's a matter of policy issues, and that being the undocumented immigration, the impeachment inquiry into President Biden. And so it really, I don't think it's numbers so much, but really on policy issues and they're very far apart there.
Tell us what happens if Congress cannot come to an agreement on this spending.
Then the government will shut down. I don't expect that it will last very long. like I said, it never reflects well on the party that's in power. And the outcry from those most affected is really impactful. One of those communities that is most impacted is Indian country. Our direct relationship with the federal government and the amount, the funding that comes out of these appropriations bills. I believe the number is 95% of our funding is discretionary. It comes out of these. So a continuing resolution different levels, the amount that they passed last year, but the proposed appropriations bills always address current issues, current situations. They really update these spending bills to reflect current situations. So Indian country has and always will be extraordinarily impacted by any government shutdown, both from the spending bills and the number of federal government employees we have both in Washington, D.C. and at home on the reservation.
Holly, I want to switch gears. We heard earlier in our newscast about the death of former Governor Bill Richardson. Tell us what your memories are of him.
It brings a smile to my face because he was such a tremendous advocate, but I also remember him as being so warm and funny as well. I was new to Washington, D.C. Back in the late 90s, and Bill Richardson was in the House. Chris Stearns was working there. Ted Johnson worked for him, and he just had a terrific team. I think those two really helped lay the foundation for the amount of advocacy that Bill Richardson carried through the remainder of his career, whether it was at Energy or in the House or as governor. All of those things, I would say there's a difference in members on the Hill. Some folks really care deeply about and truly about Indian issues. Others, they're with us, and then others, maybe it's a little transactional or opportunistic. And but Bill Richardson was one of those members and advocates and allies to Indian country that he really felt it in his heart. And you could tell because he always stepped forward, and both with policy, participation, and to naming Native Americans to his staff.
One of the memories that always stands out for me of Bill Richardson was when he was running for governor of New Mexico, and I remember seeing his campaign commercials on the TV. I grew up in New Mexico, of course, and it seems that he really knew how to run a campaign.
I would agree, and one of the few, I think, that knew how to turn out the Native vote, particularly in New Mexico, which is a historically very tough, given the geographic nature of the Native vote in New Mexico and Arizona. But Bill Richardson took the time to learn that. I was the Native vote director twice in 2000 and 2004. And when I got there, I called his former people to say, how do we do this, right? And they were really helpful. So I think, again, that's another indication of the commitment and the empathy that Bill Richardson had for Indian country. And he had so many friends in Indian country, and I think he'll be honored appropriately.
Absolutely. Well, ICT regular contributor Holly Cook-Macaro, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Aaliyah.
At FEMA, a huge part of our mission is to make sure we are preparing the nation for catastrophic events. As extreme weather continues to become more intense and frequent, disaster preparedness has never been more important. Older adults face even greater risks and challenges when it comes to preparing, especially those who live independently, have low income, have disabilities, or live in rural areas. This May, President Biden announced Older Americans Month, reminding us that older Americans are the pillars of our community, and we owe it to them to value their wisdom, celebrate their contributions, and champion their well-being. This September, I'm excited to announce that National Preparedness Month will have a special focus on the older adult population. Through our Ready campaign, FEMA is evolving the way we engage with communities to be more inclusive and impactful than ever before. Today, I ask you to join us in our efforts by finding ways to help prepare the older adults in your network or community. Stay tuned for new tools and resources, but don't wait. Visit ready.gov to get started. Thank you.
What happens when a call to the police goes unanswered? That is too often the case for residents of the Crow Creek Sioux Tribe in Fort Thompson, South Dakota. The excuses were numerous and complicated by jurisdiction, resources, and clear legal authority. However, after the violent death of a 35-year-old man, the tribe took steps to patrol the reservation. Journalist Amelia Schaefer has been covering the story for ICT and the Rapid City Journal. Hello to you, Amelia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
The idea of not being able to call for help is so frightening. Tell us how this first started.
So it's unclear exactly when this began, how or why this began, but for at least the 2 terms that Chairman Peter Lenke has been serving, this has been an issue that the tribe has struggled with. So at least since 2020.
The Crow Creek chairman has issued an emergency declaration that, among other measures, established a security task force. What legal authority does it have to act as law enforcement?
So the task force does not have the ability to arrest anyone. They have been trained professionally in operations of tasers, firearms, batons, etc. They can take tribal members home who need a ride, and they can also provide a sense of security to other tribal members. When I was visiting Crow Creek back in July, there was a family who had been harassed by a group of individuals. The night patrol team was able to circle their home and provide them with a sense of safety that they hadn't felt in a long time.
And actually tell us who makes up these patrol teams. Is it tribal citizens themselves?
Yes, it's made up of tribal citizens. Everyone is paid except for the chairman. He does this completely out of volunteering. It's made up of the tribal secretary, the game wardens, the sergeant at arms, and the provided security for the Lodestar Casino and the High Plains Dispensary.
What is the role of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in this situation?
It's the BIA's responsibility to provide law enforcement and resources for the tribe, especially tribes like Crow Creek, which is one of 3 in the state of South Dakota that rely upon BIA staffing for their law enforcement. The other 7 tribes have their own personnel, but they still rely upon these resources, which do receive funding from the BIA, and rather than staffing like Crow Creek does.
We know that tribes, of course, can assume BIA law enforcement under the Indian Self-Determination Act. Is that an option here?
That could be an option. The Crow Creek Council and the chairman have made it clear that complete tribal sovereignty is the absolute goal and would be ideal in this situation. It may just take some time to get to that point.
How are community members responding?
From what I could tell, very well. The chairman shared with me that the patrol has been successful in tracking down perpetrators and informing the BIA where those individuals are, since they can't themselves apprehend them. One night while patrolling, the chairman said he noticed a young woman walking alone, and while she didn't feel comfortable getting in the car with someone she didn't know very well, he was able to stay with her until her family was able to come and pick her up and take her home safely.
Actually, tell us the stories about some of the community members who are volunteering for these patrols.
Yeah, so I visited on July 27th, and on the night patrol trip that I attended, Yolanda Aguilara was attending. She's the only female member of the patrol force, and she's also the tribal secretary. She told me that as a mother and as a tribal citizen, she felt it was her duty to protect not only her kids, but her community. And I thought that was very powerful.
We know that the state of South Dakota has a history of being deemed words like racist or discriminatory. How do you think that that plays into this entire atmosphere?
I think that plays a large role. The state of South Dakota has a really complicated history, especially with tribes and the nearby community of Chamberlain, which did have a boarding school within it. I think that there are issues with perceptions of these communities. There's a lot of rumors that float around as to why there may be an uptick in violent crime, but I think that it's not my job to speculate, rather to report exactly what's happening. And what we do know is that Crow Creek is facing a very violent pattern right now that has no way of being checked. I mean, The tribal police, if a juvenile is apprehended, they have to drive either up to Cheyenne River or as far as Rugby, North Dakota, which is 7 hours away, and that takes them off the force for the entire day.
Did the chairman or any of the sources that you spoke to address missing and murdered Indigenous relatives in the need for more law enforcement?
Yes, they did. The chairman and the sister, she's Garrett Hawk's sister, who's his cousin technically, but is more like his sister. She attended the Not Invisible Act meeting in Montana earlier this year, and she was able to speak out about other families that have lost their loved ones, MMIW in particular, and then the loss of her brother, Garrett Hawk. And the chairman was able to speak there as well. They, having the security force, they're hopeful that this will help provide more measures so that more community members don't go missing. This similarly to when they found that tribal member who they were able to wait with until she safely was able to make it home.
Well, Amelia Schaefer from ICT and the Rapid City Journal, we thank you so much today.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.